I'd like to call this meeting of Lancaster County Council to order, and this is our first meeting. We're trying to get back to normal. Welcome everybody back up top, and appreciate all y'all being here as we conduct our business for Lancaster County. With that, would you please rise and join Council Member Billy Mosteller as he leads us in our Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for this beautiful day we've had today. Lord, be with us as we do business for Lancaster County tonight and make wise decisions for our county. Be with everyone as their safe travels home. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Let's move down to our approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Carnes, second from Mr. Blackman.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
If I could request a motion to amend the agenda to remove the executive session for tonight.
Do I have that motion, amendment?
Motion to amend the agenda to remove the executive session tonight.
I have a motion from Mr. Graham. I have a second. Second from Mr. Honeycutt. All in favor of our amendment, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Ms. McGriff is out tonight. So we're ready to approve our agenda as amended. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have 6 for, none opposed. I guess it's still considered unanimous? Okay. Any citizens' comments?
Yes, sir. We have 3 this evening.
Okay, let's move to our citizen comments. Please bear in mind this is not a period of dialogue with council or question and answer period. This is your opportunity to address council with your concerns. I ask that you address your remarks to council as a body and not to any individual council member. Please speak into the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to address council. Your time will not start until you have provided your name and address. First up, we have Brock Vale.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Dave Edwards. This is Brockville. We're here as presenters for Trinity. Did you need us now or later?
If we have any questions, we'll bring you up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Claire McConaughey.
My name is Claire McConaughey. I live at 4908 Old Gladiola Street in Indian Land. I'm happy to be back here in person after 15 months and get to see all your smiling faces without masks on, and I appreciate you having these sessions on Zoom so that we could follow along at home and try to do the best that we could without your big books of knowledge that you have in front of you, as it was hard for us to see anything that came up on the screens, but in the agenda packets there were enough things that we could refer back and forth to see what was going on. I'm speaking on the non-consent items E and J about the fiscal budget. Acknowledging that last year's fiscal budget was highly unusual in regards to budget spending, I would just like you to urge fiscal responsibility as this new budget is voted on. While a $5 gas tax increase may not seem like a lot to you, it is to a taxpayer who's on a fixed income. Likewise, me finding an apparent $1 million surplus only in one department tends to get my attention, as well as budgeting $4,000 for copier fees for a department that only spends $1,000 in actuality. I think the budgeting has been over-enthusiastic in some places, to say the least. I'm just a concerned citizen, and if I had $100 to spend at Belk in my budget, I would be more than glad to spend $500 instead, but my life doesn't work that way, and neither should the counties. I would expect you to be mindful in this coming year and saving conservatively when you're spending, in the next budget and in the coming fiscal year when you start to address the 2021 budget and 2021-22 fiscal budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes our citizens' comments this evening. Let's move on down to line item number 7, our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve consent agenda items 7A, 7B, and 7C.
I have a motion from Mr. Mostello. I have a second.
Second.
Have a second from Mr. Graham. Any discussion? I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's get into our non-consent agenda. As we get into 8A, I will be recusing myself. That is the one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mr. Mostello, my sister is the engineer on this, and I've had a lot of discussions with her, and we actually work about 30 foot apart, so I need to avoid any kind of conflict. Mr. Vice Chair Carnes will be taking over.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is a public hearing and resolution reading for Resolution 1154R 2021 regarding approval of a conditional use application to permit a car dealership and major maintenance repair facility at 1449 Memorial Park Road in Lancaster, South Carolina. The applicant is Jeanette Nabiv. Mr. Burhans, I believe you have a presentation for us.
Yes, Mr. Carnes, thank you. And members of council, good to be back up here. Okay, the request before you is for conditional use approval for a proposed vehicle rental and sales facility, as well as an establishment that would also like to do heavy vehicle maintenance and repair. The subject property is located at 1449 Memorial Park Drive, and the applicant is Jeanette Nabiv. Sherry, thank you. And so the subject property is outlined in yellow, and it is located almost at the intersection of Memorial Park Drive and Usher, and is predominantly surrounded by comparable general business zoning as well as medium-density residential. Okay. Just to give you a kind of an overview of the proposed plan, with all conditional use applications, we do ask for a concept plan to help articulate how the entrepreneur will use the property. And so the sketch before you shows how the proposed auto repair and sales facility will be operated. You have parking predominantly in the rear with vehicles entering from Memorial Park Drive and driving to the right-hand side of the building to access parking. The sketch to the right is a section drawing. It is something that was requested by staff as well as the Planning Commission, just to have the applicant show how they're going to meet the various buffering requirements on the property and making sure it's all going to fit. And so the applicant's engineer provided that drawing after Planning Commission review, and so we wanted to go ahead and share it with the council. Okay. The Planning Commission considered this at their May meeting and did recommend approval of the proposal. They did stipulate 2 conditions. One is to have the section drawing prepared, which I had previously shared with you, and again, that was just to ensure that all the buffering and fencing would fit relative to relative to the size of the property, and then also to outline ensure that all the relevant TRC staff level comments are addressed at future permitting stages. And so staff also did recommend approval of this proposed conditional use. I'll certainly make myself available for any questions that you might have.
All right, does anyone have any questions?
I got one. Did you say heavy vehicle repair or just auto repair?
It's actually noted specifically for heavy vehicle repairs, so that might be something like engine rebuilding services and things of that sort.
Is that tractor trailers, or is that, or what do you mean, heavy? Is it a heavy vehicle, or?
Heavy automotive maintenance services. So conventional auto repair, such as, you know, you might.
Okay, so it's not not big truck, you're not referring to big trucks then?
I mean, I think the category could be used to repair heavy vehicles, a construction type equipment, if that's what you're.
That's what I'm trying to clarify.
I think that if you go back to the subject property in terms of its size and configuration, I don't know if you would be able to get that kind of equipment on the property
Yeah,
itself.
that would be one of the questions I would have.
And so I think the use itself, though, also contemplates someone that wants, you know, so conventional auto repair services or light vehicle maintenance would be something like you would go to a Christian Brothers Auto or a Firestone Auto that might do brakes and mufflers and tune-ups and oil changes, the basic conventional auto repairs. But there is a heavier category that does permit more, you know, kind of a little bit more intensive vehicle repair services that you don't find in everyday auto shops. And so that might be engine rebuilding services, could also be you know, things that are going to take, that are just a little bit more intensive. But it also might contemplate, you know, some of the heavy vehicle repairs that or more commercial level vehicle repairs that you're suggesting as well. And certainly I think the applicant might be here this evening, might be able to speak to, actually no, I don't think the applicant is here this evening. They might be able to elaborate further.
Rocks, the berms, when I was looking, I think at picture 4 maybe, with all that natural vegetation there, would they, I mean, it looks pretty shielded as it is, but would they have to take that vegetation out, build the berms, plant other plants? If you just bermed up against existing trees, would you not kill them off at some point anyway?
So the idea is that they would, to install the berm, they would have to obviously remove the existing vegetation, and then they're going to plant vegetation on top of the berm. I think the idea is to get extra height out of the screening technique.
Would it not be better to not berm? Got the vegetation there?
Yeah, the ordinance gives you, you know, some select alternatives to screening. I think it's a type C buffer requirement in this area, and it's very prescriptive. And so the option that they've chosen is the berm and supplementary fencing and landscaping. And so they really don't have the opportunity to defer back to existing vegetation that's on site. They have to go with this very prescriptive formula to meet the type C buffering requirements.
Mr. Chairman, that location, I'm familiar with the location, that area needs a shot in the arm for growth, and I believe this would be a good way to get it started.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff? If not, I will declare the public hearing open on this matter.
We had nobody sign up for the public hearing.
Okay, we had no one sign up for public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to come forward and speak on this matter? If not, I will declare the public hearing closed. I am looking for a motion now from someone.
I'll make the motion to approve.
All right, we have a motion by Mr. Honeycutt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Blackman. Any more questions? Any more comments?
Just one question. What about vehicles awaiting repair? Are they going to be parked outside or inside, or where are they going to be parked?
According to our package, it said there would not be cars
Yeah,
waiting for repair.
yeah, I just want to put that on the record, Alan, and for the public to know that.
Any further comments? If not, I call for the vote. All those in favor? No one's opposed. The vote was 4 and 2 abstentions.
Is this going on consent or non-consent?
This will probably go on non-consent since we didn't have a full vote.
It's a resolution.
Oh,
Oh, it's a resolution, okay. Yeah, that answers it's not going, it's passed.
Trying to trick me, aren't you?
trying to leave, but I corralled him back.
I don't think you need me and Mr. Mostello tonight. We'll go on home. I appreciate that, Mr. Carnes. Let's move down to agenda item 8B, Resolution 1155-R2021 regarding establishing the local option sales tax credit factor. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion for Mr. Carnes. Second for Mr. Mostello. Mr. Willis?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, this is a formula-driven process. It's written in state law. This year, the local option sales tax credit factor came out to 0.000869. It was only, what would that be, 1/100,000th off from last year, so it's pretty stable. But it's formula-driven. Council doesn't really have any discretion on this, but we have to adopt it every year. Recommend approval.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Willis? Any discussion? I think we're ready. We have a motion to approve Resolution 1155-R2021. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's go down to 8C, Resolution 1156-R2021 regarding the acquisition of fire apparatus. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Motion from Mr. Carnes. Do I have a second? Second from Mr. Honeycutt. Mr. Willis and Mr. Player?
Mr. Chairman, members of council, certainly would note that we have members of the Fire Rescue Service here tonight for any technical questions. It's been a long time since I was a volunteer fireman. I'm not going to attempt to answer those. We have Resolution 1156 tonight. This has come back before council. We have information that council requested on the number of responses that each of the existing apparatus made. Obviously, we couldn't report on Indian Land aerial because there is no Indian Land aerial. But we had that information. You have the cost information. Would note that these are projected costs. This has not been out to bid yet. But the Fire Rescue Service took some actual 2020 verified cost figures and then put an inflationary factor in there. So we feel fairly confident that these numbers are going to be pretty doggone close. We're proposing to use the increment financing method for these. That was recommended by Franny Heiser, our bond counsel. You have the information in there from Brian Nurek on potential cost for if we borrowed up to $9 million. Obviously, we have the resolution that is crafted in a way that if council wants to consider an individual piece of apparatus, they certainly may. Also would note we have the generalized specifications for the apparatus in there. 3 of these would be mid-mount aerial platforms. One would be a rear-mount aerial ladder. Difference being, obviously, the platform, you have the working area at the end of the ladder. For just the ladder, it's just a ladder. And you've got 2-foot pegs, and you can hook in with a ladder belt if you want to. That gets a little adventuresome sometime. Wouldn't recommend it. But basically, this is coming to you from the making of the whole. At this point, we have the resolution before council, and if council has any particular questions on any piece of apparatus, we'll be more than happy to answer that for you.
I know the last time we discussed this, there was a lot of discussion about the truck for Elgin, and I agree with the comments that were made there that Elgin really doesn't need a ladder truck. If we wanted to put another engine down there or a rescue or something that was all cycled to sort of replace the ladder they've got, I would be in favor of that, but I'm not in favor of purchasing a ladder truck for that location.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with Councilman Carnes. I'm all in favor of Indian Land, Pleasant Valley. We need whatever we can get for them, and I'm certainly in favor of the mobile command post. I think that's something that we definitely need as we grow. I think it's be a very important tool that we can use throughout this county.
I'm in favor of a mobile command post, but I'm not in favor of a $985,000 mobile command post. I've looked online, and there seems to be a lot of options out there, stuff you can pull behind. We have a fleet of 2,500 trucks in this county. I would like to see us look at something a lot cheaper. I know several years ago, this council looked at purchasing one, but they found it at auction, and we were looking at $200,000 in, which we lost out on a bid. But, you know, going from $200,000 to $1 million on a piece of equipment, that since I've been on here, I don't know of maybe one or two situations where that piece of equipment would be used. I like what happened in Chester a few weeks ago. You definitely need something, and I think we need something, but I can't support $1 million for one. And also, I have an issue with the county purchasing a fire ladder truck for the city. We have no intergovernmental agreements with the city. The city already has 2 ladder trucks. They've got one in Station 2 that I think is a couple of years old. Like I said, we have no agreement with them. The city, they are, we furnished 3 firefighters to the city for mutual mutual aid, which the county agreed to. But the city fire department makes revenue off of businesses outside the city, as they sell fire contracts to businesses, and as part of their budget, they take in $170,000 a year on fire contracts. And also dealing with the city, they have their, down on 15th Street, I think the county pays a lot of money to use their training center. And I think all this stuff needs to be negotiated out, and I would be interested in voting to pay for a percentage of it. But at this time, I can't support that. And of course, in Elgin, I met with the chief yesterday. That's where I live, and the Elgin raised a lot of money years ago, and the county contributed. But at this point, just because Elgin has a fire ladder truck, it does not need replacing, and I don't think we can justify with that. And as far as the Panhandle, I agree, definitely I can support one at this time. I would like to see us put them on a cycle, just like we did the other ones, buying 3 or 4 trucks at one time, where they're already $2 million apiece. I can imagine what they'll be in 20 years. So, I'll just see what the rest of the discussion is. And as far as paying for them, I have an issue with this. At the end of March, our building permit fees were already 33% over budget. And what we take in April, May, and June will be close to $2 million. And I would like to see this council pay cash for one of these vehicles. Last year, we purchased like $1.3 million in air tanks, and I see no reason that this can't be accomplished.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if I could, the reason there wouldn't be an intergovernmental agreement with the city is because this would be a county-owned truck. It wouldn't belong to the city, wouldn't be titled to the city, be similar to the rescue that we have. And I believe one pumper, Darren, y'all can come up, but they're actually titled to the county. So if we needed to,
There's already 2 ladder trucks in the city at this time.
but one of them will be replaced. That's the one's about 20 years old.
The quint that they have is, their ISO requirements require them to have two. The tower that's at Station 1 is a 1996 year model truck, which we helped them purchase. We put $150,000 in what I think was a $550,000 truck, so, at that particular time.
The other thing for the mobile command post, Darren, y'all spec this out. I certainly would defer to y'all for comments on that.
What we did is we went and did research. Remember, all of this went back to the 1 cent sales tax, which we were not able to do because it wasn't brick and mortar at the time. We researched a number of different ways to do mobile command post. Mr. Harper mentioned that we tried to buy one on GovBids, and I think that was 3 years ago. Might have been 4-time moves too fast to keep up with. We were authorized to go, I think, 245, something of that nature. It went substantially higher than that, and that was a used vehicle. The beauty of it is that it had been a state-purchased vehicle in the state of Kentucky, and it had not been used, so it had no miles on it. But it went substantially higher. If you had taken that number and prorated it to today, even as a used vehicle, we'd be almost still at that $900,000 number. Part of the cost of the unit is not the vehicle itself, but the technology that's in it, and that technology will have to be maintained, but it has a lifespan of about 5 years. So you figure out how to budget for that later so that we don't have to come back and ask for money. We'll try to do that within the agency budgets to maintain that information. The command post is the one item that went up more than we projected. When I gave you this number, it ended up being more than the 3% compounded rate, and that was from talking to the particular dealership that we had looked at information from. None of these have been bid, so we don't have actual numbers. And of course, depending on what you all fund us at will depend on how the bid's done. The Fire Commission put all of this together as a package. I would also remind you that as you talk about the Elgin truck, and I stood here at the other meeting and told you that today it's not justified, and that's still true. The difference is that in 5 to 10 years, it may be justified at that point in time as a single truck. It will cost a whole lot more money than it does today. The other thing that I want you to consider is the Fire Commission, as part of its ordinance, has the ability to move trucks around in this county at any given time based on need and where that truck could be. If in 5 years we have need of that truck and growth pops up somewhere where we weren't quite expecting it, that truck could be moved from Elgin to a part of the county that had need of that particular apparatus based on the type of structures. It generally is linked to commercial structures. It's not linked to residential structures, even though that particular type unit can be used in a residential fire, particularly in what people colloquially call McMansions or whatever you want, the bigger houses, multi-story houses. It has a use there. So I don't want you to get focused on just the fact that it's at Elgin. Elgin does have a ladder that it did help purchase. The department had money that they had raised, and they put that in that truck at the time it was purchased in 2001. So that's why that department was chosen as the one where the county would place a truck. Number one, it has room in the apparatus bay for it, and number two, it had a truck, and that truck does need to come offline. It's been dollaring us to death maintenance-wise for quite a few years now. And if you looked at those NFPA documents that I gave you, you can see that it's 20 years old this year. And at 25, NFPA recommends, remember NFPA is not an absolute, but it recommends that that truck be completely offline. It already should be a second line truck. At Elgin, I can't make the argument that it's not technically a second line truck as it is. It's not the first thing out the door when they take something on. So bear all of that in mind. The mobile command post, it's not just a fire service vehicle. Remember, it is to be used by us, law enforcement, EMS, and it would also be used by the city departments if they had a particular need in there. There have been a number of instances when we could have used one had we had it. One of the largest events that we have that we used to use the older unit that we all took and it was a bookmobile, and we converted it, and we made it work, and we made it work for a lot of years, and it finally gave up the ghost. But the camp meeting that goes on is a place where the sheriff's office could use a unit of this nature. There's other calls that we go out on. During the COVID year, it was a quiet year for the need of that particular type unit. But in other years, there've been a number of instances when we could have used that unit and had the technology that was available, and the fact that it gives us a way to gather together on the scene. So I'll be glad to try to answer any of your questions, more specifically if you have any. But the Fire Commission thought long and hard about the package that they put together and put before you. So before you dismiss it or begin to pull pieces out of it, I would ask that you consider that strongly.
Darren, if we purchased 2 trucks, where would you want them to go?
If you only purchased
Only
two ladders, the absolute need would be Indian Land and Pleasant Valley.
Okay.
Darren, so am I hearing now that there are 2 ladder trucks in Lancaster?
There are 2 ladder trucks. One is a tower. It's stationed at Station 1. The county helped purchase it in 1996. That truck is already older than the NFPA recommendation for a first-line truck. It is first line. You got to understand, that truck is first line for all of Lancaster County with the exception of where Pleasant Valley can run its ladder, which is very far north. That truck, when we put the $150,000 in it, the agreement was that it would run anywhere in the county that it's called. It goes to Pleasant Valley. It has done that. It goes anywhere else in the county. It's made quite a few runs to Kershaw. That, in their plan in Kershaw, that's the truck they request.
All right, so what about the other one in Lancaster, though?
The other one is a Quint that they purchased last
What
year.
is
I
a Quint?
think. A Quint is the same thing as a ladder, but it doesn't have the tower bucket.
Okay.
It's the same thing. It's what we'd be buying for Elgin, except we're buying a 107-foot instead of a 75-foot. The city chose the 75-foot because it's basically secondary apparatus for them, but it's still an expensive piece of apparatus. But they needed that because of the 1.5 miles that ISO talks about with the concentrations and where the buildings are. So that Quint, or that second ladder, is stationed at Station 2 over at the university. So yes, there are 2 here.
How old is the Quint, the one in station number 2?
It's either a year old or 2 years old.
I think it's 2 years old.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned that the first ladder truck that the county participated in the purchase of.
We put $150,000 in it, yes.
Well, my personal opinion is the city needs to have the majority of the skin in this game because it's required, you say they're required to have 2 trucks in the city for their ISO rating.
But I would remind you that all of their residents are county residents. That's the way the Fire Commission looks at it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd echo what Darren commented. We're paying for all this out of county ad valorem tax dollars, which everybody pays. If we're gonna treat, if council says we want to have Indian Land, Pleasant Valley, and City of Lancaster all chip in 20%, we'll pay 80%. I have no heartburn. That's a policy decision of council.
A municipality is completely different than a fire fee district.
If we were charging-
They're not the same. We have an intergovernmental agreement with the town of Kershaw over firefighters. We did back in 2018. Is that renewed every year?
We renew that every
All
year,
right,
but
well,
it is strictly for the labor.
Well, we need intergovernmental agreements with the city on this kind of stuff too. That's my opinion.
So the only thing I would comment, with it being ad valorem, if we're gonna treat folks differently, I think we're gonna have a potential legal issue.
I've said all I'm gonna say.
Same here. It's
I'll
council
open it up. Y'all know my opinion.
Mr.
Go
Plan.
ahead. We'll start on this end.
Ryan, go ahead.
You have stated in our last discussions that you need a ladder truck in the center of the county.
Yes.
And the discussion was, it either needs to be in the city or down in Elgin. City is optimal because they've got the paid staff to actually run it.
And when that ladder responds out, it responds with a full crew, so that it does not draw down the manpower that we already have on the scene that it's going to. The people who can operate it, who are used to it, who operate it on a daily basis, test it, and are most familiar with it, are the same people who are running it out on the scene. It's not just one person in the truck taking it, and then we have to put a crew on it. Now, we're assisting with the hose lays and everything else, of course, when it gets there, but they send that truck out with a crew anywhere in this county that we ask for it to go. It's not automatically dispatched. but it's very soon, as soon as the IC asks for it, it is dispatched. That's not something I have to approve. That's something that's done based on the fire and the incident commander that's there and the judgment that that person is initiating.
I somewhat agree with Mr. Harper that the city ought to have some skin in the game on this, but I also know that, you know, I trust your word and the fire commission's ideas that we need a ladder truck in the city, in the center of the county.
Here's how the city has skin in the game. Number one, I know we're placing 3 people there, but we're paying a base firefighter rate, a entry-level firefighter rate. We're not paying a rate for a lot of experience. It takes experience to learn to run these trucks, extra training. It will send that truck out anywhere that it goes. But we also will be bidding a basic ladder, which is a tower in this particular instance. The city may want to, because of their own needs, put money into that truck and add other things to it that the fire commission may not have added to the bid package. They did that when we purchased them the rescue in the 2016 purchase. We did the basic rescue, which you all have seen go up and down the road. The city then decided, because they've got the full-time crews, 24/7 coverage, they needed a 4-door cab. They increased the price of that truck and went to a 4-door cab on a commercial chassis. They added a light tower. We didn't have that in ours because there wasn't room for it. When they went to the 4-door cab, they were able to put that in. So they put another $75,000 to $80,000 on top of what the county paid and enhanced that truck. That truck goes outside the city. No, because we've had such an open relationship and have tried to maintain the equality of what we buy and purchase, there has not been a city administration that has put limitations on where they can go, what they can do, and how much they can help. Those of us who have a little bit of age on us remember when they could not go past the city limit line for pain of losing their job, and they stood at the city limit line and watched buildings burn on South 200. And that was not a good day for this county, nor was it for the city. But that's the kind of thing that we're trying to make sure we never have happen again. They are an asset to the entire county. They're running rescue from the Kershaw County line on 97 all the way to the Chesterfield County line on number 9 and 903, and all the way to the river south of number 5. They're covering us for rescue with that, and they're sending people out to do that. The specialized rescue, they're doing that on the same things. We've got a lot of partnerships that we're working with the city, and I don't want to see a ladder truck destroy that relationship that we built over the years, starting in about 1990 and coming forward.
I agree with Mr. Willis. I mean, I see the city taxpayers as county taxpayers, and they do need to be serviced the same as other county residents. And being this is a specialty vehicle, and it's going to be used throughout the county, or could be used throughout the county, then I think we need to look long and hard before we turn down the request for it.
And one other thing that was mentioned is the contracts that the city sells to businesses, mainly industrial type facilities that are within a certain road mileage, and I'm not sure what their limit is. At one point they went as far out as Grace Bleachery. They had a contract there. Those industrial facilities get the benefit of the city's ISO 1 rating. So they save enough on their insurance premiums to make up the cost of that contract, probably to the penny, maybe even more, but for certain it pays for them. They're not paying for that contract just so they can say the city of Lancaster's coming. But it gives them a benefit on their side as well. It's not just the city taking the money in. They're obligating themselves to respond. But we're still sending the county units at the same time. But remember, primarily we're dealing with volunteers at night and on the weekends, and so our response time is delayed, whereas the cities is not. But the industrial complex is benefiting from that too.
Mr. Blackman.
Darren, first of all, thanks for the great job y'all do at the Fire Commission. When I think of firemen in general, I think of people rushing into fires, and that's a mighty noble thing that they do. And along those lines, me personally, I don't want to see us lose a relationship with the city. you know, I want to see that fireman attitude prevail at the management levels and above, council levels also, so that if there's a need, they go. So they don't stop at a line and say, I can't go, you know, it's not my jurisdiction. So right now, it sounds like we have a pretty good thing going as far as coverage goes. If we were to buy a ladder truck for the city station, number one, I guess, will Lancaster then keep up the second one? Because if it looks to me like that is their skin in the game also.
It is to a degree.
You know, they might need the ISO rating and all that, but we all do. I mean, we all have certain needs depending on all those facts and circumstances for the rating. So by us owning a truck and putting it there, I think that helps us. Now, so for that reason, I don't mind putting a truck there if Lancaster's going to continue to have a truck also. I think everybody's covering their citizenry, and I think we're getting fairness to all our citizens, and especially Kershaw, He Springs, well, maybe not He Springs, as much as Kershaw needs to have a truck nearby, and that willingness for those guys to go charging out when there is a problem in that part of the county. My only heartburn is, and I'm just going to talk about two things real quickly. Number one is we're all of a sudden coming up at one time for all these trucks. And, you know, we did that on the air packs, but we did that for a multitude of reasons. You know, we wanted consistency and all that between all the departments. We got a good discount on that equipment purchase. I think that was a very justifiable call. What I'd rather see us do is do like we do with the other fire fleet, is have these trucks on a rotational basis where we just don't have to replace off. If we go to an Indian Land, which I hope we do, you know, one in Lancaster, you know, I just hate to see future councils have to buy 3 again somewhere down the road when I'm long gone. I think we need to program in a rotational basis somehow, so we can take. I'm like Chairman Harper. I'd like to pay for all this out of general fund, but I don't know if we can afford 3 out of the general fund or not, as opposed to going the financing route, because we do tax our citizens pretty heavily, in my opinion. So that's my only heartburn. Is I'm not sure where the vote will go, but I think we have 2 issues personally, council. I think we have the command post as one, and then I think we have the fire trucks as the other. I think we probably ought to segregate and decide that way. Just a suggestion. That's
all you
my.
got to do, there's a motion on the floor for approval. Anyone can make an amendment.
The resolution's crafted so any
Yeah.
individual piece of apparatus can be amended individually.
Mr. Player, I have another question for you. There have been discussions in the past about having a countywide ISO rating.
We have a countywide ISO.
Okay. Would that ladder truck play into that countywide ISO rating?
The ladder trucks play into it where they're needed. That's why when Mr. Honeycutt asked me that question he did a minute ago, that had to be my answer, because that's where in this county we need ladders. In Pleasant Valley, we need 2 of them because of the way that district's laid out. That's why that one would not move somewhere else. That was not a viable option. The other is there needs to be one in Indian Land because of the 1.5 mile option, the 1.5 mile requirement from ISO. So those are the 2 places in the county that ladder trucks are justified, and if we're inspected, we're going to have a penalty for that. Whether it would change our rating, I can't stand here and say, because I can't run their algorithm. ISO keeps that secret. They don't sell it to anybody or give it to anybody, nor do they explain it. But when you look at that's why they have to be there.
I was asking more about the truck in the city of Lancaster. Does that play into the ISO rating as well?
It plays into it because it's a ladder that's available in places where it would be needed. The city has its own rating. It's a 1 by itself. It got that 1 because our manpower, meaning the people who report to me as career firefighters, are able to respond into the city, and we do, and we did, and that showed up in that record, and I think that helped tip them to the 1. The ladder truck is definitely needed for them. For those few facilities around us, yes, it would count. To tell you that it counts for Kershaw, it doesn't, because it's too far from there, even though effectively it matters a lot for the town of Kershaw. For ISO, it won't. So probably countywide, that one ladder won't affect our ISO rating one way or the other, but the two in Indian Land and Pleasant Valley, Indian Land and Pleasant Valley could, based on how things roll. But we do have a countywide right now, it's a 4, and I don't anticipate that we'll be able to do a whole lot better than that. We might could go to a 3, but I don't anticipate going much further than that unless you all spend a lot of money, and I don't feel justified in asking you for that.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Talking about, the trucks where they're needing stuff, no doubt Pleasant Valley and Indian Land's got to have them, but we got to have one in Lancaster South, down this way, because of the large structures that we have. If we have a church fire or something, you need to roll a ladder truck, and the city's always brought theirs out, and we got to have a ladder truck that'll roll into the county. Or if it's in Beaufort or Belltown or Kershaw or wherever, Elgin, wherever we have a big structure fire, that truck is going to roll. And they usually don't wait till they call. Most fine if they hear it, it's a big structure. You can ask Darren, them boys will jump the truck. They on their way, saving time. But I like you, I have a little bit of heartburn doing all this for the city, but I don't know that we have a choice. I would like to see us have some intergovernmental agreements. We spending money with them on this. We're getting charged a lot of money for that training center down there that the sheriff and EMS used to have to pay. And I think, Darren, you probably have to pay
So
some.
we didn't enter into that agreement.
I think they need to help us out a little bit as far as.
And that will be cut that payment once EMS moves out.
Okay.
That's based on square footage used,
Right.
so it'll be dropping in the immediate future.
Us spending $2 million for them with a ladder truck, they ought to really give us a big cut with us using their facility. We do them for them. They need to scratch our backs also, and don't charge for so much with that facility down there. I really think that we got to try to get something going between us. Y'all do a great job working together, always have, and but I would like to see maybe something can be done on that, Steve, or on your end of it or wherever, but.
That's a little above my pay grade.
Yeah, the mobile command post, I think the county needs one. We to the point in the size of the county that we need one now. Where if it's $1 million one, I don't know. I would like to see something, maybe some cost cut on that somewhere, maybe something, get the cost down, $750,000, something, that we can get down. That's a lot of bucks for us to pay for a command post that I think we should. I think I'll support buying one, but I want us to try to buy with a thinking cap of how we can save some money, get what we want, but not be so elaborate with it. So that's what I will support one, but I would like to see if we do not try to not be $1 million one.
I think
I'm
Mr.
not
Mostello
completely-
wants the Ford, not the Ferrari.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm not, opposed to these trucks over a period of time. I'm opposed to the bond. I don't see us borrowing $9 million. We're finishing up our budget. I know back in March, we were already 33% over on permit fees, with 3 months to go, and that'll be close to $2 million. That my suggestion is to buy one this year, maybe one next year and 1 year after. And on a command post, I would like to see something scaled way back. It's just a piece of equipment that I know it's very important when you do have to have it, but very limited uses, and most of the technology that would be in one of those, or laptops or radios or whatever that people carry with them. So, this time, I can't support this complete package the way it is. But it's not that I support, I love the City of Lancaster Fire Department. And, us paying for the whole thing, I just have a problem with that.
Mr. Chairman, I'm the only one that hasn't made a
Yeah, go
comment.
ahead.
I've been listening, but it's pretty clear that there's a couple of things. One, Pleasant Valley and Indian Land definitely need the ladder truck. I think strategically for Lancaster County and this end of Lancaster, the city should have a ladder truck, or it should be there. And if it is important that we have a good relationship with the city and that they respond. And as long as you're comfortable, they will respond outside of the city. I'm fine with that. I'm very skeptical of Elgin needing a ladder truck. I mean, I look at the data. I saw 2 responses in the last year and very few the year before. I mean, so I'm a little, the data doesn't support it at this time. The command post, I think, while it's needed, I don't know that it's needed right now, and I don't know that we need $1 million command post right now. And that's my 5 cents.
Mr. Chairman, I got a few more comments to make.
Go ahead.
I think we need to really concentrate on where the growth is in this county. We need to make absolutely sure that the people in the Indian Land area where all the growth is now, where your high rises are going up, you got 4-story buildings where seniors are going to be living. We need to be prepared for that sort of thing. Are we prepared up there? I think we are. The thing is not good. We need to know we're prepared. Whatever we do, I would not support anything if we don't include Indian Land, Pleasant Valley Fire Departments for these trucks, because we've got to have it. As we grow toward Lancaster, which is happening now, we see it. It's coming, whether we like it or not. It's on the way. We're going to have to take a look at another firehouse somewhere in the 521 area. You got 2,000 houses coming up down just north of Lancaster. We've got to be prepared, not wait until it's there. We've got to be prepared to do something about it. The command post, I'm certainly in favor of the command post. And I'm sure that if we get down and negotiate with people, we can reduce that quite a bit. But we're talking about the need. We need that command post. It's going to be vital to this county as we continue to grow. But growth to me brings a lot of pain. And it's showing, it's pretty evident. So when we talk about any of these things that's going to help the people, we need to really take a hard look at it and know what we're talking about. You know, when I came on and you, Mr. Willis came on, we had 4 different type breathing apparatuses in this county. If you show up for a 4-alarm fire, you had 4 different type canisters that people were using to breathe in case they had to go in there and go in a smoking building. We don't have stuff like that now. We've got a rotation where we're replacing so many of these things that we need, fire trucks, whatever. We need to continue to do that. That's good policy. That's keeping us prepared for the future. Buying one for the city doesn't matter to me one way or another, just so long as we get to 2 in Indian Land, because that's my concern right now.
All right, well, at this
Chairman.
point, we have you want to make more comments?
Could I ask a question of Mr. Hardy
Yes,
since he's
sir.
here? Mr. Hardy, in the Roslyn development, are you going to have any 3-story houses there?
Potentially. I had to think through it, I'm sorry. If we're debating right now whether to go all age restricted, because Treetops is sold out, and obviously, you know, Sun City's sold out, or do the 50-50 that we talked about earlier on. If we do the 50-50, there will be some 3-story traditional family homes. If we go all age restricted, there'll all be a maximum of 2 stories for the active adult.
Okay.
One other thing I would ask that goes to a question you asked me, it came to my mind. There are industrial buildings right outside the city on Quality Drive. I don't know if all of them have contracts with the city or not, but those buildings do require a ladder. Now, the city is running to that because it's right there on the city limit line. But industrial development in Heat Springs and other places, there would be a need for a ladder. Elgin would qualify if that park in Heat Springs happens to take off. You already have RICO, but you have to have a certain number of buildings, those sizes, before the ISO requirements start to kick in. Right now, we don't have that concentration anywhere out in the county. Most all of it's right in the city or in Indian Land and Pleasant Valley.
Pardon me. I wanted to mention that the 140 acres of commercial up front at Roseland, the Normans have talked about hotels and things like that that are needed to house guests. That if our regional park becomes, you know, a tournament park, then obviously the hotels will be built there. That there'll be, I guess, 4 stories, 3 to 4 stories.
Well, they could be 4 to 7. I think the Marriott.
Could be, right.
How tall is the Marriott? Is it 5 or 7?
The town's
should know
place, I
that,
think
right?
it's 4, I believe.
4, okay.
I just wanted to make sure I brought that up.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have a motion to, for approval of resolution 1156-R21. Are there any proposed amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a proposed amendment that we purchase 3 trucks, aerial platforms, 1 for Indian Land, 1 for Lancaster, 1 for Pleasant Valley, and that we look at purchasing the mobile command post with the understanding that we're going to try to do much better on the budget.
All right.
I'll second that amendment.
How does that, is that all right on the command post, Mr. DeBose, or does it need to be more specific? Or,
So I get, the motion as made, I think, would probably technically authorize the command post as set forth in the resolution. It appears to be a suggestion that there be some guest budgeting or amendment of the specs to try and get the dollar amount down. Council could certainly authorize that as a not-to-exceed amount, but, and I don't, it's a policy question, but I don't know if that meets the needs necessarily of our fire department, because then they're kind of reverse engineering. But again, I mean, that's certainly a possibility.
if he could put a reduced dollar amount.
Correct.
Okay, I will change that to $750,000.
All right. I have a motion, amendment from Mr. Carnes for approval of 3 trucks and a command post authorized and spend it up to $750,000. To have a second.
Second.
And have a second from Mr. Bosteller. Any discussion? As I said, I'm not completely opposed. I just wish we would pay for one and look at paying for another one next year and maybe another one a couple of years down the road. With that, anyone else like to comment before we vote?
So, do we need to, do we need to amend the motion for a funding source or a funding mechanism?
Well, I mean, it's
Funding mechanisms built into the
built
resolution
into-
right now.
Yeah, but, okay, but did we make a motion to pass the resolution, then you amended it? Is that the way it worked?
Yes.
He amended.
So we did have a motion
amended.
to pass the resolution?
Yeah, we've already had the motion
Okay,
passed.
all right. Thank you.
All right, we have an amendment on the floor. All in favor of Mr. Carnes' amendment, raise your right hand. Opposed, we have 5 for and 1 opposed. The amendment passed, and we're ready to vote on resolution 1156-R2021 as amended. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have 5 for and 1 opposed. It passes. And those trucks, how long will it, when will they go in, be ordered?
Darren, you'd have to talk about that. I think
What-
normally it's
what's the
12 to 18
timeline?
months.
The construction time could take 18 months to 2 years now, based on availability of parts, computer chips. Of course, all of that's tied into how fast we do the bid. if y'all authorize us to go ahead and finalize the specifications and then to issue the bid, and then at that point, then we may have to value engineer. The mobile command post is the one item that probably the fire apparatus people won't be able to bid on. If we'd gone with one of them, it'd have been $1.5 million instead of $985,000. We went with a different manufacturer as a recommendation on that. Now, who will end up getting a bid, we don't know, because we'll be doing a performance specification so that nobody thinks they've got us tied up, regardless of where we started. That will help us be able to get the best price we can get and have the most number of vendors bidding on the project, because that's in our best interest. Competition's always good.
All right.
But I can't tell you a time frame for certain based on availability. COVID really fouled up a lot of supply chains throughout the whole world, and anybody that's trying to buy a vehicle right now, new, right now the pickup that you all allow us to buy in our budget sitting in the field in Kentucky, completely manufactured but with no computer chips in it. We're waiting for that, so that's what we're dealing with.
All right.
Mr.
Thank
Chairman,
you.
question for Darren, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
How did we arrive at the 985? Did we get people to give us bids on this command
We did not get bids because
How did we arrive at the 985?
we called vendors who deal in the particular field, in the particular trucks. And if you saw, there were two particular vehicles on that mobile command post. One went to Miami-Dade and one went to, I think it was Las Vegas or somewhere out west. The vendor told me what the actual cost was on those vehicles as they were purchased, meaning as built, on that day that I talked to him. And I took that price, put it in that spreadsheet, and then we advanced that 3% a year. Because remember, we started out with a 1-cent sales tax, which is several years ago now.
Yeah.
So that's where we began planning, and that for Mr. Blackman's question, that's how we ended up with all these trucks coming up at the same time. That looked like a mechanism we'd be able to buy them all and not tax the county inordinately to do that. So that's where we arrived at the figure. So it was a legitimate price on those particular vehicles on the day that I called and got the email responses back. We did the same thing with the fire apparatus.
Maybe we could make some more calls, Mr. Chairman, before our next meeting and bring that down a little bit.
Once we start
I mean,
bidding,
we've already voted, getting ready to vote, already voted on it.
once
so
we
know
start
we're gonna
bidding,
get it.
that's a different story. Yeah, we can deal with it.
All right, let's keep this meeting moving. Third reading of ordinance 2021-17, 42 regarding authorization for the issuance and sale of Walnut Creek Improvement District Assessment Revenue Bond Series 2021A-3. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Mr. Graham, second from Mr. Carnes. Who is doing that? Mr. DeBose?
Members of council, I have nothing to add from the information presented on second reading. Certainly make myself available for questions. That said, I'm not a bond attorney, so if you have a very hyper-technical question about page 84 of whatever document, it might be the first time I'm hearing the question or seeing the question. So that said, I am happy to answer what I can for y'all if you have any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, I have a very specific bond question for Mr. DeBose. Just kidding. Just kidding. I have one question, though. How does this help our constituents?
I don't know that that's a legal question.
Okay,
I don't think that's legal
I'll ask
advice.
that to Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Willis.
if I could, basically, Lancaster, for a number of years, before I became county administrator, has been involved in this, and of course, it helps the larger developments actually come about. We have done in the past, and Mr. Hardy's here. For example, Sun City, we had the library, and they paid for the ladder truck that Pleasant Valley has. We have the EMS station in a park at Walnut Creek. They've been very gracious working with us on our regional park at Roslyn. So there's simply some history there, helps, and my understanding is that helps hold down some of the upfront cost and then the homeowners just pay for it over time in their taxes. Specific question on, does it help the county or not? I'd argue that's a policy question, but simply it's been done before, and with the exception of the one hiccup at Edenmore, seems to have worked fairly well. But that's going to be a council policy question.
Understand? I would think we had two hiccups, though. One was Walnut Creek, and well, that was Edenmore, wasn't it?
That was Edenmore.
And then the one out there at Fishing Creek also.
Yes, sir.
So I just don't see how it helps our constituents in any
Well,
way, shape, or form.
I'm not sure we would, if it was coming up today and Walnut Creek was being created today, I would be not in favor of incentivizing growth in a high-growth area. It was done at a time when there was, Edenmore was in trouble, and the county was trying to get growth. And, but and that's why I supporting this one, because this one goes back that far. Ordinarily, I would not vote in favor of this.
If this was a brand new one, I think you're probably right, Councilman, because this is just the finishing of a bond that a previous council already approved, so.
All right. Any more discussion?
My last comment would be, and if it was really needed, I would be in favor. But since it's not needed, that's why I will be voting against it.
All right, thank you, Mr.
For
Blackman.
this one, well, what we're doing here is we have to authorize this every year so they can set their assessment rolls.
This is authorizing a whole nother issue of 4.1 million. This,
Oh, this is the one. I was thinking it was the Walnut Creek one, sorry.
All right. Anything else?
I don't have anything further.
All right, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? It passes third reading by a vote of 5 for and 1 opposed. Let's move down to, I think it's 8E, public hearing and third reading of ordinance 2021. I got something come up on my computer.
1740,
1740 regarding
amending the fiscal year 2021
20
budget.
budget. All right, do I have we have a public hearing, and so Ms. Belk, it's all yours.
There's no changes for third reading. This was on consent at second reading. Other than the public hearing, that's the only reason that it's back on non-consent for third. So no changes.
Okay, we do have a public hearing.
Nobody signed up, Mr.
Nobody
Chairman.
signed up. If anyone would like to speak on this, please come forward and I will allow you to speak. Seeing no one wants to speak on this matter, I'm looking for a motion to bring this to the floor. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Graham, a second from Mr. Mosteller, for approval of third reading of ordinance 2021-1740. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, I think we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's go down to third reading of ordinance 2021-1737 regarding rezoning property located at 182 Patterson Lane from NB to MX. Do I have a motion?
so move.
I have a motion from Mr. Blackman. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Honeycutt. Who's doing that one? I'm used to looking at my paper and I've put it in my folder. Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. As previously indicated, this is a proposed rezoning of a 7-acre parcel from professional business to the mixed-use zoning district. The rezoning is ultimately to support an overall mixed-use development involving a 352-unit multifamily development. At the May 24th County Council meeting, the council did vote 6-0 to pass second reading of the ordinance. I have no further information to present beyond what's already been previously shared, but I'll make myself available for any questions. And the applicant is also here.
All right, thank you, Mr. Burhans. Any questions for discussion? Looks like we're ready to vote on third reading of ordinance 2021-1737. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's move down to 8G, third reading of ordinance 2021-1738 regarding approval of a master development plan submission of Arlington properties. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
A motion for Mr. Mostello for approval.
Second.
Second for Mr. Carnes. Mr. Burhans.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as indicated, this second item is for the approval of a mixed-use master plan, again, to support development of a 352-unit multifamily development. At your May 24th meeting, the council did pass second reading of the ordinance by a vote of 6-0. I have no additional information to present, but will make myself available for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Burhans? Any discussion? I think we're ready to vote on third reading of ordinance 2021-1738. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's move down to third reading ordinance 2021-1739 regarding approval of a development agreement with the Arlington properties. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Honeycutt.
Second.
Second for Mr. Carnes. Mr. Burhan.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is a development agreement that is associated with the previously discussed rezoning and mixed-use master plan development. None of the terms have been modified since second reading of the approving ordinance. Council did approve second reading of the ordinance at its May 24th meeting by a vote of 6-0. I'll certainly make myself available for any questions, and Mr. DuBose is here also to answer any development agreement questions.
No questions? I think we're ready to vote on the third reading of ordinance 2021-1739. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's move down to 8I. Mr. Willis, on this grant application, are you looking for a motion now or afterwards, or you just?
Would like a motion now because we have crafted this into the second reading of the budget, and so I need to make sure council's okay with this grant match. This is more of a grant match than we would normally do, so we had to make sure it was in the budget.
Do I have a motion on our grant application?
I'll make that motion, especially for discussion purposes.
All right, I have a motion from Mr. Blackman for our site enhancements program. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Mr. Graham. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, of course, due to Jamie's regrets, he has a family emergency and is not here this evening. We certainly ask you to keep him and his family in your prayers. This is a late-breaking grant application that Jamie just made us aware of. This is coming from Department of Commerce, and the proposal is to fund the clearing and grading of Site 4 out at the County Air Rail Park. And as you recall, if you go out Mount Nebo Road, you have Fancy Pockets, then we have one graded site to the right as you're on there. Site 4 would be continuing, and it would be to the westward of the existing graded site. Site would be capable of handling, would be cleared so that it would be capable of handling a 100,000 square foot building, which could eventually be expanded to a total of 300,000 square feet. The Department of Commerce is willing to give us a $300,000 grant. We have to come up with the balance. Jamie has the cost estimate. This does include a 10% contingency. The all-in price is $618,450, leaving us a balance of $318,450. Jamie has a verbal commitment. We do not have a written commitment for $50,000 coming from Duke Energy. which would offset that and bring it down below the $300,000 threshold. However, as indicated, that's a verbal commitment. I don't have it in writing, but never known Duke to go back on their word. You have the grant application letter that was sent. You have my letter to the Department of Commerce saying it would be discussed tonight, and I would have to get back with them for a decision of council. You have the site map and you have the pricing. Any real general questions I'll try to tackle, but that's basically the proposal.
Yeah, Mr. Willis, about that bond question. Now, is this, so we're going to take this out of our grant matching funds for this fiscal year?
If council were to approve, yes, sir, and because that is more than we would normally do, Kim has adjusted the second reading budget. And that's why I had asked the chairman, normally this would be a discussion item. I asked for it before we have second reading on the budget. So if council were to say, no, we're not interested, that would impact second reading of the budget. If council says you are interested, we've got it covered, but I needed to make sure what council's intentions were before second reading.
But are we talking about the fiscal year ending this June 30th?
No.
No, sir. Fiscal year 21-22.
And sorry, Steve, I need to correct you on that. So that is not in the second reading proposed version of the budget. So I need direction from y'all when we get to the budget ordinance if you want to amend that to include this or not.
All right. Are we maxed out on our, I'm not trying to get ahead in discussion, but, we throw $300,000 around here like it's $10 poker game sometimes. It kind of scares me. So are we maxed out with our millage increases for our upcoming budget? In other words, with all the positions we added in our wish list, did we max out our millage?
My understanding is no, Clem, I'm not sure the exact amount we have left.
You have like 0.8 of a mil left. But this, I think, would be proposed to come from fund balance.
Yes, sir.
Based on discussions, yeah.
It would be a one-time, so certainly would not ask to recurring millage increase.
Mr. Chairman, we've heard from Mr. Gilbert time and time again about needing product, or at least needing sites that are available to be built on. And, we have a jewel in the rough out there at the Air Rail Park, and if this could help spur that along and move towards the fact of getting a building on it, then I think it's a well worth investment.
I agree with Mr. Carnes. Even though we have experienced a lot of growth, we don't have an interstate. Mr. Gilbert the council have tried to recruit developers to come in and build spec buildings. We haven't been able to come to terms with anything that would work for the county and their citizens. And the number 9 corridor is our industrial corridor. And I think it's a great project.
If you ever wonder what an interstate can do for you, just drive over to Rock Hill and look at all those warehouses and buildings that have been constructed. And I don't think the city or the county's helping pay for those. It's all developers coming in there and putting those buildings in. I mean, they've added millions of square feet.
Any more discussion?
But they don't have a Lancaster airport.
That is true.
Okay, any more discussion on this? We have a motion from Mr. Blackman. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. All right, we have a public hearing and second reading of ordinance 2021-1741 regarding consideration of fiscal year 21-22 budget. Mr. Willis, Ms. Belk.
Mr. Chairman, would certainly note that Veronica and Kim are here for technical questions. We have included the items that council discussed at first reading of the budget. Would note that for second reading, I have provided additional information that council had indicated they might would like for reconsideration on two positions, the fleet mechanic and the fire inspector. Those have been provided. Not had a request for any additional information, but I believe the data clearly shows they're needed. We do have the information. We were asked to bring back for 2 litter collection workers. Those will be part of the Public Services Department. Would note we would have some one-time equipment on that. So we do have that information as well. We've already discussed the Mount Nebo Road project, just discussed that before this. The one thing I need to discuss with council that I did not discuss at first reading, and this came about after touring the new EMS headquarters. We're going to need some custodial help for EMS, and this is one I'm proposing to add a custodian, but it would not be part of the building maintenance department. Similar as we have the custodians at the courthouse that fall under the control of Jeff Hammond because of the security concerns there. This person would be around vehicles that have highly restricted drugs and pharmaceuticals in them. So the proposal would be this custodian would be under the direct control of Clay Cato, the EMS director. Would handle headquarters, but also periodic heavy cleaning out at the EMS stations. So, have requested basically where we were on first reading and requesting reconsideration of the fleet mechanic position, the fire inspector position, adding the litter collection workers, adding the EMS custodian, and adding the Mount Nebo Road project.
We will be looking for amendments.
Yes, so we'd have to have amendments for those items if council is so inclined.
Okay. We do have a public hearing on this, and we'll have additional information from Mr. Willis and Ms. Bell if needed. This is our county budget. Apologize, I'm having computer problems. I can't see everything I need to be looking at. But no one signed up.
No, sir, nobody signed up for the public hearing.
I appreciate Ms. McConaughey speaking about the budget. I don't think last year anybody spoke at all. And if anyone, this is the most important thing we do. This is our citizens' tax dollars. If anyone would like to come up and speak on this, I will allow you to do this at this time. We'll give you three minutes. So would anyone like to speak on our budget? Seeing no one would like to speak, we'll close our public hearing, and I'm looking for a motion to bring.
I was going to ask, well, if we had the motion first, I was going to ask to let Kim talk about, because this is reassessment. We're actually decreasing millage this year, and let her cover some of that.
Oh, okay. You don't want to get do we need to get a motion to bring it to the floor? Let's go and get a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve it, to put it on discussion, to put it on the floor.
All right, I have a motion for Mr. Graham for approval of our second reading of a budget. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Mosteller. Go ahead, Ms. Belk.
As council is aware, it is a reassessment year. So with rollback in our operating, during first reading, it was proposed with no millage increase, and that was at 81.1 mils, down from 88.7 mils. With the changes that were made at first reading, which I did supply in the packet a list of everything just to keep everyone's memories fresh of what was changed, because it was a lot. We did go up 2.4 mils, which still leaves 0.8 of a mil for county operating. I do want to mention, I know Steve mentioned some items if y'all wanted to add to the budget at second reading. I also am requesting that y'all make an amendment so that the sheriff's Town of Kershaw budget and the school resource officers' contracts align with those contract amounts. We did the change with the career ladder where we put that in there. I need to account for that within those contracts as well. So if someone could, would be amenable to making a motion to amend to align those SRO budget and the Town of Kershaw's budget with the contracts, that would be appropriate. That's all I had for this meeting.
All right, well, let's do this one thing at a time. Let's, Ms. Belk has some cleaning up, I guess you'd say, that needs to be done.
Yeah, it just needs to align with each other.
Kershaw contracts, do I have a amendment to cover that?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the amendment to align the Kershaw Sheriff's budget and the SRO budget to align with the contracts that we have.
Thank you.
All right, we have an amendment to align those contracts. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Mr. Honeycutt. Any discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote on that amendment. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. All right, all right, we're ready for, any more comments you want to make before we have discussion up here?
I guess the next one might be in the Mount Nebo, since you've already voted on
Okay,
that, but we need
yeah.
to have that as a motion to
Do
amend.
I have a motion to approve the Mount Nemo grant?
I make the motion to approve the Mount Nemo grant.
Motion for Mr. Brown.
Second.
Second, Mr. Carnes. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval on that amendment. Does anyone want to start with general discussion on the budget, or I'll look for amendments or discussions, whatever the council would like, because we are requesting some amendments on some positions.
Well, I'd like to start off discussion. I sent an email to everyone about the general ledger account numbers. And I only went through 11 pages because I didn't want to waste any of my time if I didn't have any traction with council. But in the first 11 pages, there are 10 general ledger accounts that I cited to you guys that we could reduce each one by a minimum of $1,000 and not put any stress on that department. You know, to me, that's just fluff. And so I'm going to be making that as an amendment to the budget, just because it's unnecessary. That picks us up. That picks us up at least, if we do 1,000, that picks us up $10,000. There were some more specific ones in there too that were larger than that. Account number 107-011-530-00. I see that there's a $20,000 reduction, again, without putting any stress on that general ledger account. I think that budgeting should be specific. It ought to be management-driven. It needs to be accountable to the people. And when we have that kind of money in there, we could save some millage. If we just transpose that 11 pages to the 84, multiply all that times 7, and it comes out to be a substantial savings. Probably save us a meal or two if we really looked at the budget carefully.
Sure.
Go ahead, Ms. Willis.
If I could, certainly, obviously, this is council's decision. One thing I would note that when you're looking at comparison to last year, there's an awful lot that didn't happen last year because it was a COVID year. So I'd be very cautious about making comparisons of where we are, what we're proposing for next year versus where we were this year. One example, was Jamie's advertising budget. He didn't get to do a lot last year because he couldn't do some of his trips and all that. He's planning on improving this year. One of them was council's travel and training. If y'all tell me less than 7 of y'all are going to the conference next year, I mean, we can do that. But I have to assume for budgeting purposes, everybody's going to attend. So I just simply would caution, would defer to Kim on specifics, but any kind of comparison to last year, I would argue is fraught with danger because it was such an unusual year. A lot of things didn't happen. And just as with the state, they mentioned this what they're doing this year is almost a two-year budget. They're playing catch-up. We're not really playing catch-up. We're just trying to get back to normal.
Mr. Administrator, you know, you give us this information, so you gave us last year's actual expenditures, and then you gave us what was proposed in the way of the budget.
Yes, sir.
And this is like copiers. This is like simple supplies in these 10 accounts I have. And then we see what we have spent this current fiscal year. If those 2 years weren't indicative of why you're justifying this upcoming year, we should have been given more information on past years. But I'm not really, I agree with you on Jamie's. I don't really want to see that cut at all. But when you look at these accounts that I'm looking at, this is very basic information. It's not COVID related. It's just a matter of if a copier lease costs you $1,000 or $1,200 a year, year after year, why are we budgeting year after year $4,000 for that copier, for that department? That makes no sense to me.
And again, a lot of it goes back to when we're doing the budgeting, we're looking at what we think may happen. If we come into the good, great, but if we come in over, we get fussed at. So you tend not to get fussed at.
Well, I haven't seen us fuss at all because we've had surpluses every year I've been observing council.
We have great department heads. That's all I can say. It's not anything
But again, these are simple copier leases. I don't imagine what they are because it says copier expense, $1,000, or we spent $1,000, $1,200, but we're budgeting year after year $4,000. It makes no good financial sense to me.
If I may speak to that point, when we look at those budgets, something like the copier lease, we look at it over at least a 10-year period and set it based on that. In the last year, that's largely based on use. You know, as I spoke at the April Committee of the Whole meeting, we had a lot of people that were working remote during the last year. They weren't here making copies. We do have a base cost, but we also have toner cost that gets charged there, and a per copy a per copy cost depending on if we go over a certain threshold. So I would just caution council against cutting in certain areas because that's set at that level because in a recent prior year we were close to that. We do decrease them if we can see that trend happening over a period of time. But, you know, last year is not a good year for comparison's sake, so.
Well, maybe we should have seen previous years. If last year is an outlier, it might have helped us understand the budget better if we'd have seen the previous year or the trend. I mean, we're dealing with information you give us, but we don't see the trends.
You know, I would argue that, you know, that is staff's responsibility to look at the trend, and we do analyze that, but I mean, if that's something that y'all want to see, you know, I don't have a problem pulling copier information. We look at that when we set those budgets based on trends, so.
Yeah,
Kim, I would argue that we're the policy makers. You're asking us to set a policy based on a certain amount of information. I reviewed that information in its entirety, and that's not good information to make the decision that you want me to make. So if you want me to make the right decision as a policymaker, you've got to give me the right information.
Councilman, if I could, this is the same format we've used the entire time I've been here, almost 14 years. And we always ask council if any additional information is wanted. We haven't had it. And next year, if y'all would like trend data, as you heard Kim say, we'll be happy to provide it. We've never been asked in the past.
I brought this up at the Committee of the Whole. I brought it up at the first reading. Did you not read the tea leaves that it wasn't enough data to convince Alan that it was a good budget? I actually called it fluffy in one meeting, and you disagreed with me. I still think it's fluffy. Until you show data that shows me that it's not. Because we're talking about people's money here, y'all. We're talking about millage on people. I don't want to be a councilman that in 4 years of serving, or however many years I might, that we had budget increase after budget increase after budget increase, look at the value of our mill, up over 10%. We can't operate on that kind of improvement. That we also have to put millage on top of our citizens. You know, if we're gonna do that, I want it justifiable. And whatever data it takes is what we need to have as a policymaker.
Do you?
I
you
would
wanna-
comment that while the millage is up 10%, we are in an assessment year, so we can't have advantage of that being up 10%. We've had to cut the number of meals that we're
Understand.
actually putting on people, or that we're basing our budget on.
Are you gonna propose an amendment on this, or?
Only if I think there's traction here at council and I'm not seeing head nodding, so I can just, I've made my points, and if someone would like me to make the motion, I'd be glad to. These are only 11 or 10 out of pages 11, so there's probably plenty more yet to go.
I would say you won't know whether you're gonna get support unless you make the motion.
Okay, I make a motion that we, and I won't recite them all, just I'll make reference to the email that was sent, that we reduce those general account ledgers mentioned in the email, that we reduce them by $1,000. And I will say that if, again, just using the copier example, if we're budgeting 4,000 and we've only used 1,200 or 1,000 in the past 2 years, and we're only gonna cut it 1,000, we're still at 3. There's still some fluff there. So I don't think that we're going to upset the fruit basket by any means by reducing these accounts by $1,000. So I make the motion that we reduce those 10 specific accounts by $1,000 in the budget.
Second.
Have a amendment from Mr. Blackman, a second from Mr. Carnes. Any discussion? All right, then I guess we're ready to vote on that amendment. All in favor of Mr. Blackman's amendment, raise your right hand. Opposed? We have 3 to 3. So it fails. All right, let's move on to our next. We've got some proposed positions.
With that, I guess we'll take the positions if council, if you want to start, I guess, pick one at random, litter collection. We had 2 people proposed for that. Do I have a motion? My computer's down, so I can't look at numbers or anything. All I got is my front page. Would anybody propose an amendment to hire 2?
Yes, I
Litter.
will. Yeah.
They will work for Public Works, and what would they, if
Yes,
they would also be assigned to whatever in case of
Yes,
rain?
these 2 would be part of the Public Services Department, yes, sir.
Jeff, they would be used otherwise wherever if there wasn't.
But if it was a rainy day, they couldn't get out, yes, sir, but other than that, they could be picking up litter.
Okay.
Well, that sounds a little vague. I mean, they should be picking up litter. I mean, I can see them being drugged in other directions.
All right, we have an amendment, motion for Mr. Honeycutt. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second for Mr. Mosteller. Any discussion on those 2 positions?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that they are litter, and what's the cost? And you said they need
Kato, would you
they need a
address that?
vehicle too, and who do they report to? Which roads are they gonna pick up?
While Jeff is coming up, I'll speak to the cost question. So, it's about $102,000 in recurring costs in terms of, wages, fringe, and uniforms, that sort of thing, and then $150,000 in one-time equipment funding.
Mr. Cato.
Yes, at the request, we put this in. This was not something we had designed.
Y'all didn't put, this come from
Right,
council.
so we,
But
we
you-
did the.
you had, I think the question is, the council wants to make sure that these people are assigned to working on?
You had discussed
litter
working
problem.
with
Yes,
Randy
they
Cato.
will be assigned, basically, at staff's discretion, but that discretion will be based mostly on, if you'll become aware at the next committee of the whole meeting after presentation, the Keep Lancaster County Beautiful Coordinator has been involved with Keep America Beautiful doing the litter assessment countywide. She's already identified things like the heaviest road in each district, so to speak, so we would concentrate, you know, where the fire is most. But yes, our goal would be to have them picking up litter. That's what they're going to be doing.
So, you know, like roads like Hillcrest and Airport
Yes.
Road.
Yes, it would be
there are
roads like that. We
problems.
would have to be, you know, careful in where we put them for safety reasons, you know.
Yeah.
Be a little bit cautious and abide by DOT encroachment if that, and again, it would be, you know, our discretion, staff discretion to keep them within the road right-of-way. We don't want them picking up vacant lots unless it's our property. You know, if it's our property, that's fine.
And their safety is number one.
Safety's gonna be number one. Finding out where they are
So
will be number two.
you will have the proper equipment and,
Yes,
I mean, the
we
proper,
included
150 where you
equipment and
can,
stuff in the estimate, yes, sir.
okay.
Excuse me, what's the 150,000 equipment? What is that?
Yes, that equipment will be, they'll need a pickup truck and a trailer. And then we've got in there some type of something for them to ride on, like a gator or golf cart or something, just for, you know, bigger roads with big right-of-ways and things of that nature, just have them riding on that. And of course, that's all we had.
I was the one that recommended Jeff take a look at that, because if they're up on 521 and they're on foot, they're not covering a whole lot of territory.
No,
If we have something with a gator, they can cover a lot more territory on some of these major highways.
Yeah, they can
Well,
put
they won't
trash
have-
trash
they'll-
back up as they go.
Yes, sir.
They won't have to go too far to pick up trash. Because it's everywhere.
10 feet that way, right?
All I can say is with the trash we see on the highways, these folks have job security.
All right, any more discussion on that amendment? Have an amendment from Mr. Honeycutt to approve 2 employees to pick up litter. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. I guess.
Next one would be, I guess, the EMS custodian.
Do I have a motion?
So move.
Motion for Mr. Honeycutt. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Mr. Carnes. Discussion?
Could you go over the job duties again that they would be doing, Mr.?
Yes, sir, they would be custodian. Currently, you know, we have just a building maintenance custodial crew that handles buildings in general. The exception is the courthouse. Jeff has his own custodian over there because of the security concerns, the information they potentially have access to. We would be looking for the same thing here. This person would be under the direct supervision of Clay Cato because they are around vehicles with highly restricted pharmaceuticals, and we just have a little more security and background check on this person than we would just the average custodian. But they would be custodial duties primarily for EMS headquarters, but also for all of the EMS stations on a once or twice a month basis for heavy cleaning. The medics take care of the daily taking out the trash and sweeping, things of that nature.
Is this a full-time position?
Yes, sir, full-time. And again, that's one that, until I got up and, you know, you actually see the EMS headquarters and the space and, you know, the quality
What
of
is that?
everything up there.
20,000 square foot plus building,
It's, was it,
How
Clay? It's
big?
over 20.
28,000. Any more discussion? All right, we have an amendment on the floor to approve a custodian for the EMS. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. All right,
The next one would be the fire inspector position. We provided the, you know, additional information as to number of buildings that not currently inspected. If anybody had any other questions, obviously, Darren's here. He can answer that for you.
And Darren, as this would be a, like all your other staff, would be a fireman that could respond. Isn't that correct? Okay. All right.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion from Mr. Carnes, second from Mr. Blackman. Any discussion? Hearing none, I think we're ready to vote on the fire inspector. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval.
And last but not least, fleet mechanic, we provided the information, just some benchmarking comparisons to York County. This one would be a heavy mechanic, I guess, man, that's a technical term, heavy mechanic. They're diesel type mechanic. Currently we have 2 light mechanics, we have 2 heavy mechanics, we have 1 floater. We benchmarked against York County, and as I noted, that, you know, they don't do fire trucks. They have their own fire inspection, or it's not fire inspection, excuse me, fire rescue maintenance facility with their own mechanics, and they don't do ambulances because Piedmont is a private service. But when you look at, you know, an apples to apples comparison, despite having fewer heavy vehicles, we have 2 fewer heavy mechanics than York County. Just asking for one. And it would be a heavy mechanic, diesel mechanic, as you heard Clay mention the other night. You know, there are times when you only have 2, when one's out sick, one's on vacation, or whatever. We got 1, and if he's got an ambulance that needs fixing, sometimes that could be a problem.
Brandon's here if anybody got any questions for him, or y'all want to bring it to the floor. Let's see if we get an amendment to have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Got a motion from Mr. Carr, second from Mr. Mosteller. Is there any questions for staff? I think we're ready to vote. We have a motion for approval of the mechanic, a heavy mechanic. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? The addition of the mechanic passes by a vote of 4 to 2. All right, is there any more amendments or discussion on the budget?
Simply would note that we do have the sheriff here, we have the auditor here, you know, we have Robert from Public Safety Communications here, and they all said thank you for first reading, particularly Suzette. She was very appreciative of council.
Mr. Chairman, could we possibly, for the committee to hold tomorrow, have a listing of all the new employees that we're going to
Yes, sir.
have? Be good for us all to see, because we're sporadically changing things, and
Yeah, you
it'd be
know,
wise to have that.
in this county, we continue to grow around 3% a year. It's a lot of stress and strain on all our public services, and
Yeah, we can't take things for granted anymore. We're growing too fast for that.
Yes, sir.
We got to do something about it.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if I may, Barry, could you come up for just a second? While Barry's coming up, one thing that Barry just made me aware of, and I hate to put him on the spot, but I want to make council aware of an opportunity that Barry may be availing himself of. I think it's a marvelous opportunity. He has an opportunity to get a mental health counselor at the detention center. And all of y'all know that the state has underfunded mental health for years and years and years, and the detention center's become a dumping ground for mental health patients. Just became aware late last week he has an opportunity, may potentially end up using one of the 2 correctional officer slots. And again, that is building in anticipation of the new detention center. But at least for for 1 year, we may actually use one of those slots for mental health. Barry, you want to tell council about that? 'Cause I think it's a marvelous opportunity to be a benefit to the detention center.
Just got notification through the mental health here in Lancaster that they'd be willing to ante up about $35,000 toward a mental health position on a full-time basis in the detention center. And that would leave us about a $30,000 cost to pay that position. That way we'd have a full-time person in the jail all the time, dealing with inmates and providing the beds as well.
This is something that, I know we don't like to do amendments in July or whatever, but would that be like,
If
you
this,
take out a grant match or something, or is that?
well,
illegal?
if this pans out, this would be kind of
mean,
a
this-
trial this year. If it pans out, we would bring, well, hopefully the new administrator would bring to y'all next July or next June. To go ahead and make it a full-time position, we would just add that correctional officer position back up. But as you've seen, with the 3 medics we do, that's the first half of EMS 10. With Act 388, I can't give Clay 6 medics in 1 year. We just can't afford it. The 2 part-time telecommunicators that Robert is getting, hopefully next year, we'll be able to bring them back and maybe bump them to full-time. With the 2 correctional officers, it's the start of trying, because you have to have 4 per shift. Getting us prepared so when the new detention center is there, we're not in a real pickle with staffing issues out there. And so if we do that, it would just be a 1-year trial with one of the 2 correctional slots. It's something like that. I want to make sure council's aware of that opportunity and that it may happen. Obviously, Barry being an elected official, he can move the money in his budget where he wants to. We just, full transparency.
Well,
When
I
you
do,
said you were gonna bring him forward, I hope he was gonna sing for us tonight. I don't think that's gonna happen. Go ahead, somebody had some
well,
serious.
I was gonna say, I do think this is something that's very much needed, especially in Lancaster County. If you look at the statistics of the probate judge and the number of mental cases that she has to deal with, it far exceeds the norm in South Carolina. So I'm sure that equates straight to the detention center also, that we have a greater burden in Lancaster County with this issue probably than any other county in the state, and I think it's very much needed, very much commended.
Well, you probably have a higher percentage in the detention center than what the overall county is.
Yeah, but I think it's very much needed.
Mr. Chair, I've got a comment.
Go ahead.
Mr. Willis, I want to make sure all the stars are aligned for the sheriff's career ladder.
Yes, sir.
Or the grant money, all that's in line.
We have the 3% that, what we've always done for the sheriff, he gets the 3% and he disperses it, he sees fit. The other thing that Kim and Veronica have prepared within the budget ordinance, should some of those grants that council has previously discussed become funded, and we get them again that year, that money at that point would also roll into the sheriff's career ladder.
Just wanted to make sure everything was lined up for that.
And we did recently have a meeting, the sheriff and I and Steve, just to make sure all that would work out, and we're good.
That's great.
On the same page.
Thank you.
All right, as we move on with our budget, this is the most important document or ordinance that we pass every year. This is our second reading. If there are any changes, any major changes, well, I'd say major, anything over $1,000, really needs to take place now. So is there any more discussion? I thank staff, Mr. Willis and Kim and Veronica.
It's not me, it's Veronica, Kim, and the department heads.
Department heads for what they do. I don't think we thank them enough.
And one thing I would promise, because you had the public hearing tonight, unless something major happens, we would be in touch with the chairman, he'd be in touch with all y'all. We don't bring amendments at third reading. It's not fair to the citizens. They wouldn't have an opportunity, because whatever's done tonight, they can still come at the next meeting and talk to their citizen comments. If we make a change on third reading, the citizens don't have a chance to comment, and I just never thought that was fair.
I got one more comment. This is, I think, my 5th year of the budget, and we've been bare bones every year with our personnel, really have. And I think this is a year that we had to catch up with some personnel, give our department heads some help that they've been needing for a while. And I appreciate y'all guys, stepping up. I think we kept the budget down as best we can, but we've also been able to handle some of our growth, give our personnel part of it. So.
All right, any more comments on the budget before we vote? Hearing none, we're ready to vote on second reading of ordinance 2021-1741 as amended. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? Second reading of our budget passes by a vote of 5 for and 1 opposed. Let's move down to first reading of ordinance 2021-1720 regarding amending the Lancaster County Code of Ordinances entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion for Mr. Graham. Have a second to bring it to the floor?
Second.
Second from Mr. Mosteller. Mr. Willis or Mr. DeBose?
Mr. Chairman, this is an update, and beyond that, I'll defer to John.
Members of council, the motor vehicles and traffic section of the county code, as you'll see from the proposed amendment ordinance, was enacted by Ordinance 284 in 1996, almost 25 years ago to the date. That code as it exists requires that the county place towed vehicles in a county tow yard. County doesn't really have a tow yard, so mechanistically, the ordinance as drafted does not really work for its intended purpose, which is to get derelict vehicles out of people's yards or piled on the sides of roads and towed off and disposed of. This ordinance mirrors state code and both the nuisance vehicle provisions as well as the judicial auction by magistrate court provisions. Has a very strictly prescribed process that the county would need to follow in tagging vehicles and then having those vehicles towed by private entities. And again, perhaps ultimately auctioned by the magistrate court if they are not redeemed by the owners. The ordinance places a 5-vehicle restriction on inoperable vehicles that can be stored within an enclosure. Outside of an enclosure, the proposed ordinance only allows people to have 2, essentially, I guess, for lack of a better term, junker cars that they may be working on, but again, it limits people to just 2 inoperable vehicles that are not titled or lacking tags. That is about it as far as the substance of the ordinance. Again, I can answer any specific questions y'all might see, but y'all perhaps noticed from all of the underlined text that there is quite a bit of addition, and that's really just porting in the state code provisions and procedures and making it very explicit.
John, who's going to pay for moving these vehicles and so forth?
So that's one matter that Development Services Director Rox Burhans and I have been discussing. Who's going to come pick up a vehicle that maybe you can only sell for $100? It's a very good question. It's one thing I wanted to mention to y'all. We don't know that this will in fact be some silver bullet for the problems the county has with these junk vehicles. The thought is that to make this worthwhile, I don't think it can be on a rotation with tow services. It's probably something that will need to be bid to a provider. County will take bids, have certain criteria even perhaps in bidding it out. But that's how we kind of envision it. So some people will pick up a vehicle and won't really make any money on it, but maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 they make some money on it, and over the course of time it's worth it for them to do it.
So if they pick it up, they can have it, in other words.
Correct. Yeah, a tow company would be notified after the vehicle is tagged and the prescribed amount of time passes. It's 2 days for vehicles just kind of left on public thoroughfares. I believe it's 7 days within the ordinance for vehicles on someone's property. But once they're towed by the tow company, I mean, they can be redeemed essentially, but if it's a inoperable vehicle without any title, I mean, it'd have to fit within the proper storage provisions of the ordinance if it's put back on someone's property. And again, it limits the number of junk vehicles anyone can have on their site.
This aligns us with state laws.
Correct.
And it allows, I guess, that who picks up these abandoned vehicles, I don't know, they have to keep them so long, and they can apply for title, or
Correct.
It allows them to dispose of them.
Correct. I mean,
legally.
they have to provide notice to the property owners, that is the personal property owner, the owner of the vehicle. And that said, if a vehicle is picked up and there's difficulty in determining ownership, lien holders, the ordinance, again, mirroring state code, makes provisions for the tow company to reach out to the sheriff's office to have them run it through NCIC, which is a national crime database, make sure vehicles aren't shop vehicles, et cetera, but can ultimately determine ownership for providing that legally required notice. So yeah, it all mirrors state code, and I mean, to the point and the need to update it, it doesn't even reference the DMV. I mean, it's still, our current code refers to it as highways and public right now instead of DMV, so.
The city, you might get some ideas, but the city, I'm familiar with it because they send out bid packages every year. I get one because I'm in automotive business, but asking for bids for this, and you store these vehicles, and a lot of these places about do it practically for nothing, just to get the vehicles, because nobody comes back and claims them or whatever, then they sell them for crush them, and they get really big money. Cut catalytic converters out from under them, $200 or $300 a piece. So there's a lot of money that these storage people can make from these vehicles. They'll be glad to pick them up for you.
Yeah, and speaking to the city's process, I mean, this updated ordinance, the kind of structure of it was taken from the city. It was beefed up with some more specific state code sites, but this is the process. Sorry, the city uses right now. So.
Well, when you got old cars hanging around the house or up on blocks, and all that does is just make our county look bad to have that happen. If we can get it cleaned up, we'll go ahead and do it. We hired two litter people to come clean up our highways. We got clubs all over this county that's being formed just go out and pick up litter. So, as a county, we need to make sure that we get those things, old cars and whatever, around places, people's houses that don't need to be there, get them moved.
Correct, and to Mr. Mosteller's point, ROX did reach out to the city about their process and how well it has worked, and is aware of their setup, and I think we intend to kind of mirror their process.
All right.
The zoning department's been pretty active in that for the last year of, there's certain places that, I mean, you wouldn't believe people could live like that, but they do. And zoning has been very active and has done a good job with it too.
All right. Any more questions on this ordinance? All right, we got a motion on the floor for first reading of ordinance 1720. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Let's move down. We have a public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2021-1743 regarding rezoning property from RN to INS. The applicant is Trinity Baptist Church. Mr. Burhans.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. This is a proposed rezoning of a single 1 acre parcel from the rural neighborhood district to the institutional district. The ultimate intent of the rezoning is to establish a cemetery facility. The rezoning is located at 1519 Steel Hill Road, and the applicant is Trinity Baptist Church. Just wanted to give you the location map here on the screen. Again, the subject property, the church, Trinity Baptist Church, is identified with the red star there, kind of in the middle. This site is located about a quarter-mile northeast of the intersection of Old Hickory Road. The rezoning site before you this evening is the purple parcel that you see identified as rural neighborhood. Now, this map looks a little non-traditional than what you normally see, is because the Trinity Baptist Church's campus is split between the unincorporated Lancaster County and the town of Van Wyck. And so, parallel to this rezoning application, they are also proposing to rezone the parcels in red to institutional in the town of Van Wyck. And so we just share this information with you for just background and perspective. But the only item before you, again, is the rezoning of the single 1 acre parcel. It's kind of purplish in color right there fronting Steel Hill Road. And the underlying intent, as stated by the church, was to establish a cemetery for their congregation. Okay, just to get you familiar with the location, these two photos are just kind of looking directly at the subject property, generally from across the street. And then the photo on the left is looking from the subject property south down Steel Hill, and then the right is looking north down Steel Hill. Planning Commission considered this at their May meeting, where they discussed predominantly the intent, for the underlying intent for the rezoning, while they also heard a presentation by the church. The proposal was found to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and they ultimately voted 3-1 to recommend approval of this rezoning, which is consistent with staff's recommendation. I'll certainly make myself available for any questions. I believe there are also congregation members here with Trinity Baptist Church that will be happy to share additional information as well.
All right, we do have a public hearing, and I guess we had a couple of members of the church. They signed.
Nope, nobody signed up for the public hearing, but they did sign up for citizens' comments.
You can either speak, or if council has questions, you'll be glad to answer them, or if you want to make if y'all want to make a statement, come on up. I'll give you 3 minutes to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're laughing, 3 minutes won't get him.
It will. I'm Dave Edwards. This is Pastor Brockville. I live at 612 Marvin Meadows Road in Indian Land. I'm a member of Trinity. 3 months ago in March, Trinity celebrated its 15th anniversary. Statistically, during that same 15-year period throughout the United States, on average, 3,000 new churches or congregations are formed each year. And on average, during that same 15-year period, 7,000 churches closed their doors, never to open again. Obviously, the net result, you guys are great with numbers, is a net loss of 4,000 churches a year. And you may say, well, 4,000 is not that bad, but you multiply it across 15 years, and that's a substantial number, and that's just in the United States. I don't know if you have in your package or not, but I hope you do. You probably saw the sad front page of the Lancaster newspaper from May the 1st of 2021, where it showed them using construction equipment to tear down the sanctuary of Linwood United Methodist Church. And it's an all too familiar pattern that we see. Congregations age, the seniors pass away, there's no influx of new members, especially young families, and you have a predictable outcome, just like in the lifespan of a human, where they can no longer afford to maintain their physical plant. Happily, Trinity has a completely different situation. We're growing. Prior to COVID-19, we were having 2 Sunday morning services to accommodate the people who wanted to attend. Church growth comes in one of 2 ways, either by people joining or by the growth of existing young families. Right now, Trinity has 60 youngsters age infant to toddler. They're on an average. And that's encouraging, especially to me, to see on a Sunday morning, to look out across that parking lot or looking at Family Life Center and see husbands and wives, mothers and dads, 25 to 35 years old, arriving with 1 to 5 young, fresh faces coming to church as a family. And so what we're trying to do is facilitate something that the church membership wants, which is a church cemetery. You know, it's pretty traditional in the South, and especially with Baptist congregations. Trinity is invested in Lancaster County and in Van Wyck, as the staff report indicates, as you saw on the map. The 5-acre tract where the main church campus sits, we own. We own the 1 acre to the south, and we own 8.8 acres surrounding. And we just ask that you approve this 1 acre tract for use as a cemetery. And in order to do that, we need to have the 1 acre tract zoned institutional, just as the main church campus is zoned.
All right, while these gentlemen are up there, does anybody have questions for Mr. Graham?
Yeah, I got some questions. Why is part of the track in the town of Van Wyck and part of it not?
Well, we didn't have anything to do with that. The church was there before Van Wyck existed. And then when Van Wyck was incorporated, certain parcels of property were taken into the Van Wyck city limits, and then the church purchased those tracts.
Okay, so you purchased them after the incorporation, okay.
We did.
Okay, that explains that.
Yes, sir.
And what's the status of the Van Wyck application?
Well, it may be that that is on hold for now. The reason being is that we have sufficient property to build another church building if we need to, and we would only need to get onto the part that's to the north for a drain field for a septic tank. And in speaking with some of the zoning people and others, apparently it does not necessarily have to be zoned institutional for us to put the drain field on that property that we already own. In other words, obviously a drain field is allowed on RN property. No different than if we put a house there.
All right.
So you're going, where was your new building going to be then? Was it, you're going to take down the old one?
You see the blue piece?
Yeah.
If we do a new building, you see the star is right over the existing church main building.
Okay.
And so you see there's a huge amount of property between the north border of that building and say the yellow line within the part that's already zoned institutional.
So it's on hold in Van Wyck because you don't know what you want to do yet with it, is
Well,
that correct?
We don't necessarily know that we need or have to go through rezoning it. And, you know, obviously if we do, then that's what we'll do. But for right now, for the purpose that we foresee using the part you see there in red, it doesn't require rezoning.
Just a little odd to have a parcel like this divided into different jurisdictions, and why wouldn't you just put the whole thing in the town of Van Wyck?
Yeah, well, we didn't have any control over that Van Wyck.
What you do now, you could annex them now if you wanted to.
Well, we just inherited a situation.
And we're just looking for future growth. And right now, we're trying to implement the cemetery as, you know, that's kind of our next step. All these other steps are just is future, you know, because you look to the future and you want to build buildings and add, but it is for future growth.
Yes, sir. We know that growth is coming, just like y'all have discussed about all tonight. And we have actually, we're not, you know, letting growth hit us in the face. We've engaged the services of Dr. Maurice Henson, who is a church consultant, who consults with congregations on things like smart growth and planning for the future. And he's known throughout the Southeast, and I think Rox may be aware of him. He was, used to be at First Baptist Church of Indian Trail, and sort of a leader in the Southeast and that sort of thing. And he consults with us on a regular basis, actually.
Has your opposition to the cemetery been minimal, or
haven't
been a
heard
lot
any.
of talk about it, or?
We haven't heard any, Mr.
Not at
Honeycutt.
all?
And I assume your whole parcel's surrounded by incorporated area?
It's my understanding that the remainder, certainly the red is that not correct?
Yeah, but I was wondering about across the street and adjacent property, and, because then you'd be a donut in a time.
Well, yes, sir, except that you see the parts that are in the purple. I understand that those are outside the town limits, maybe.
And of course, City Cemetery now is low maintenance, with no headstones or anything for long-term.
Yes, sir, our plan is that it'll be, flat bronze markers. And we understand also that in the county ordinance, there's some very specific things about setbacks, hedges, site radius for driveways, things of that nature. And in fact, we're probably looking at just using the regular church driveways that already exist to access the cemetery.
All right.
How did you arrive at 1 acre for a cemetery with a growing church like that?
Well, with, the trend now is toward cremations and columbariums and things of that nature. And we can, figure that we can accommodate for the foreseeable future with 1 acre, based on information we received from a gentleman by the name of Phil Hoskins, who owns 3 cemeteries in Kingsport, Tennessee, who has consulted with us. But also, you see, we have the red section behind there also, and if we need to expand, I guess we could.
That'll be somebody else's problem.
Well,
You put a lot of people on acre.
Yes, sir.
Especially when they, a lot of cremations. Okay, any more questions? We appreciate y'all answering our questions.
We appreciate your time.
If anybody does have any additional questions, we'll holler at you.
Thank you.
Any discussion up here? Okay, I think we have a motion for
Yes, sir.
first.
We don't have a motion
We
yet.
need a motion. Oh, yeah, I need a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
Move to approve.
A motion, I heard Mr. Mosteller. Who was the second over here?
Mr. Blackman?
Mr. Blackman. Discussion. Hearing none, we're ready to vote on first reading of ordinance 2021-1743. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2021-1745 regarding rezoning property from MX to RB. Applicant is 1450 LLC, and Mr. Burhans.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. This is a proposed rezoning of a single 5-acre parcel from the MX, or mixed-use zoning district, to the regional business district. This parcel may look somewhat familiar, as it was originally a part of the county's MX rezoning initiative about, 18 months ago, where we comprehensively rezoned several non-conforming properties throughout the county. At that time, towards the tail end of that process, the applicant, or the owner of that property asked us to pull this property out of the rezoning initiative, as they were thinking it might be able to be used by an adjacent MX developed property for an expansion. They have since contacted the county, and they now wish to move forward with the original rezoning we had proposed to regional business. This property is located within the Edgewater Corporate Park, and it is immediately abutting the Flats Apartments near the intersection with Possum Hollow. And the applicant is 1415 LLC.
All right, we have a public hearing on this with
Nobody
no
signed
one
up.
signed up. Anyone like to speak? Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing. I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter to the floor.
Motion to approve?
Motion for Mr. Carn.
Second.
Second for Mr. Honeycutt. Discussion. Questions, anything for staff? Hearing none, we're ready to vote on first reading of ordinance 2021-1745. All in favor, raise your right hand. Unanimous approval. Let's go down to N, public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2021-1746 regarding amending the Unified Development Ordinance, the UDO, regarding off-street parking and loading requirements. Mr. Burhans.
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is a review, or actually this text amendment takes place as a product of a review of the county's parking ordinances, particularly for food and beverage related establishments. In reviewing that section of the parking ordinance, we did find a couple uses that were inadequate as it relates to required minimum parking. We think that that is attributed to maybe some general policy goals that were in the UDO, wanting to minimize impervious surface, so they used perhaps some lower parking ratios than what the market might demand for said uses. So this amendment doesn't contemplate changes to Chapter 7 of the UDO to bring some of our parking standards up to a current standard. Okay. So the first amendment will be looking at bars, taverns, and brew pubs, which specifically aren't called out within our parking table. And so we are proposing a parking rate of one parking stall per 50 square feet of indoor seating area. There is also, if it's a brewery, we are requiring one space for every 400 square feet of brewing space. And then for any outdoor entertainment areas, or if you have it or any outdoor sitting areas, or any indoor entertainment areas like a dance floor or music space, we are requiring a parking at one stall for every 3 occupants of the space based on a fire occupancy rating. Similarly, with restaurants, we're requiring one stall for every 75 square feet of seating area, and the same thing for entertainment type spaces and outdoor seating using an occupancy classification of 1 per 3 occupants. Again, this is based, we did not just develop these on our own. We did some fairly comprehensive research looking at, I don't know how many cities or counties are on that list, but I'm going to guess more than 15, maybe as close as 20, to try to zero in on what might be appropriate. So we use this as the basis for the numbers I just shared with you. And again, we definitely found out we were hopefully inadequate to address those types of uses. Sherry. We also looked at our parking ordinance as it relates to the MX zoning district, whereby it utilizes a standard rate of one stall for every 400 square feet of uses, regardless of the use. We feel like that's inadequate. The reason being is that, while that district does encourage some intense and somewhat urban types of development, we are still a suburban community. People still come to those establishments from cars. We don't have transit service, and we just feel like the goals were noble, but the reality doesn't work out well. And so we have removed that general parking standard rate for the MX district and defer to the rate for specific uses. And so that's the basis for that. Planning Commission considered this at its May meeting, and they unanimously recommended approval of the text amendment and appreciated the research staff had undertaken. Staff also, it's our amendment, so we of course are also recommending approval of it. I'll certainly make myself available for any questions that you have.
All right, we have a public hearing scheduled on this before we get into questions.
Nobody signed up,
No one
Mr.
signed
Chairman.
up. Would anyone like to speak on the parking requirements? Seeing no one would like to speak, do I have a motion to bring this matter to the floor?
So move.
Second.
Motion for Mr. Blackman, second for Mr. Carnes. Discussion?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, Mr. Burhans, this was some excellent, I didn't know, when I started reading, I didn't know where this was gonna end up, in the conclusion, so to speak, but, your research was excellent. That's the kind of thing I like to see, to be making decisions and all, so you made the answer for me very easy.
My only concern is, like in my district, you know, with the economy, a lot of small restaurants, such as Punky's, used to have a location on McElwain Road, and it's in like a little strip. There's a convenience store, liquor store, and a couple other that, you know, right in front of the little restaurant, that there's not adequate parking, but they're on down. It's always worked. And for the community, I would hope or that zoning or planning would be able to work with existing, that, you know, I know a lot of things are grandfathered 6 months, but when somebody's got a restaurant, the equipment's there, and, you know, it might be a year or two before somebody will try to go back in.
Right.
And
So-
you know, just,
We understand your concern, Mr. Chairman, and it's a very reasonable one, and so, you know, if the business, if it was previously a restaurant and for whatever reason closed down, and I know what you're saying, in some of the more rural locations, the parking's not in that same quantity, maybe it's even a little more informal than in a shopping center or something like that.
you know, the issues that we've had are on bigger
Right.
type.
We generally have a practice of, you know, allowing them to reestablish the use, and we would work with them to maximize the parking they can get on the site that they have.
That's my only concern, and I agree our standards definitely needed to be updated. Any more discussion? Thank you, Mr. Burhans, again. I think we're ready to vote on first reading of ordinance 2021-1746. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. All right, let's move down to discussion and action items. We've got a bunch of appointments. Does someone want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve all the appointments listed in this, our agenda.
We might need, one of them, we
Oh,
got
no,
to have a
I'll
super
vote.
majority. So, well, if, let's just do this, and, all in favor, we got a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, to have a second. Second from Mr. Carnes, all in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. That's your thought. All right, let's go down to, discussion of premium pay, for, select employees. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, this is coming back at council's request. Council at the last meeting said they wanted to take a look at potentially doing some premium pay with general fund, and then we would seek reimbursements later. Couple of things noted in the agenda item summary. We do not anticipate getting the final rule from Treasury till July 15th at the earliest. They originally said May 15th. They didn't meet that. Not holding my breath on July 15th, but we'll see. Did note that one troubling section in the interim rule is that if you're going to, if the premium pay would take the employee over 150% of the state average wage or the county average wage, whichever is higher, in our case it'd be the state, which basically be about $68,000, $69,000 a year. We have to have permission from Treasury. We're hearing from NACO, apparently that's just going to be a form letter, but we don't know because we're still dealing with the interim rule. I would note particularly for some of our senior deputies and paramedics, if we weren't paying that to start with, we wouldn't have them because we're competing with Charlotte, Mecklenburg, York County. One thing I would note that has changed from the agenda item summary, want to make council aware of, on the last NACO call, the federal government has now said that we could put the money in an interest-bearing account while we're waiting on the final rules. And I've asked Veronica, and she has started the process to draw down the first tranche of the federal government money. It's a little over $9.5 million. The reason we were kind of holding off till we could see what the final rules were going to be, but when, you know, NACO advised that Treasury had said you could pull it down, put it in an interest-bearing account, Treasury has said the interest that we get on the money is not subject to the ARP restrictions. It becomes general fund money that council may disperse as you see fit at some point in the future. Interest on $9.5 million is a pretty good little chunk of change. So, we went ahead and that process has started. Kim has checked, and if council were to desire to proceed, we can do this within the sheriff's budget without going over budget. Public safety communications, probable but close. We would likely exceed budget within fire rescue, EMS, coroner's office, and solid waste if we proceed on this. The one thing I would note, if council desires for us to go ahead and proceed, we still intend to follow the process that we had discussed on a staff level. Department head's going to have to certify the employee was there, they weren't working remotely from home, on sick leave, whatever the case may be. They were physically present, interacting with fellow employees or the public, at least 300 hours, we would pay $10 per hour premium pay. That's below the 13 that the federal government set, with a cap of $3,000, which council had previously discussed. We would intend to seek reimbursement, but with the final rule not being promulgated yet, I can't guarantee we're going to get reimbursed for all of it. I think we get reimbursed for most, but I can't say because we don't have a final rule from Treasury. Veronica, is there any comments you have? Because one of the things we talked about, we would have probably for each department a separate resolution for council to approve it at the next meeting, because this money is going to be heavily audited, and we're going to have an airtight audit trail. And each resolution, we're going to say, this is the purpose that council is approving the funding for. Here's the section that this would qualify for under the interim rule if we do this, final rule once we have it, and the amount of funding that was allocated. So again, we know this is going to be heavily scrutinized, and I haven't made it a secret. I've told Matt Chase this. I hate to say it, but with the amount of money that's floating around out there, somewhere in the United States, there's going to be some administrators and council members in jail over some of this money. We want to make sure it's not here in Lancaster. We want to have an airtight audit trail for this. So, Veronica, I know you're working with GFOA as well.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Steve has said, we just need to make sure our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed when it comes to this money, and make sure we have enough justification and backup. We did apply for the money last week, and hopefully within the next 10 days, if everything goes well, we should have the monies deposited in a separate bank account at the local government pool. So we want to try to keep everything as separate as possible.
Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. Carnes.
I personally, with the uncertainty on everything and the fact that we're only a month away from when this is supposed to happen, my recommendation would be that we wait until that point before we distribute the money. I think we need to be ready to go the minute we get it, and we can go running, but I don't think we need to go marching down this road and then find out when we get down it that half the money that we've distributed we're not going to get reimbursed for.
Yeah, we're going to, on this, I guess we're looking for a motion.
If council wants us to do something with general fund, if not, we're going to hold off. Once we have the final rule and we have some definitive guidelines we can present to council, we'll have a resolution. And in this case, for premium pay, it would be for each individual department, listing the department, the amount in that department. And, so again, there's airtight audit trails on this
Yeah,
funding.
but there, like you said, the money is available. It'll bust a couple of budgets right now, but more than likely, we could get reimbursed.
We think.
We think.
Yes, sir.
So I need a motion. I think I need if somebody,
Mr.
wants
Chairman.
this to move forward, I think they would need to, make a motion, as the staff talked about how this could be paid for, is that correct? Or I need a motion.
Yes, if
Mr.
the
Chairman.
council wants us to move forward, we need a motion, and we'll have resolutions for the June 28th meeting.
Do I
I'll make
have
a motion that we move forward and that we use the general fund money that we have. As outlined, the sheriff's department has the majority of his, so it would come out of his general fund, I guess we'd call it. Make up the difference wherever we need to in our general fund. So I recommend that we move forward with it, so we have the resolution ready to do we have to have the resolution to vote on it next meeting, or can we not vote right now to do it?
I'll second that motion.
I mean, if council wants to make a motion to move forward, we can. I would prefer we have a resolution so we can say definitively it's X amount of dollars per department. And that way, again, for audit purposes, I'd ask if you would, please just give us 2 weeks till the June 28th meeting. We'll have resolutions available.
So I'll make that motion that we get the resolution in 2 weeks to actually vote on it, so we know which department it is. And with that, you know, I have no intent as a council member to ever do anything sinister or blowhand. If we don't get the money from the federal government, as far as I'm concerned, these people are very worthy of this money, and I am more than willing to spend our general fund money one time like this for their heroic efforts during that pandemic time.
And I totally agree. If once we promise employees something, we need to back it up.
Amen.
With something other than words. We've got people that's told me that they've never had this opportunity to take their family on a nice week vacation, and they just were proud to be an employee of this county because now they were going to be able to do it as a family. And here we're saying that we're going to have to wait. That's wrong. Absolutely wrong.
Well, I think-
I got a motion from Mr. Blackman. Did you second it? Did you second?
Yeah.
You did second it. All right,
Mr. Chairman,
discussion.
but I think we made a fatal flaw in telling people that this money was available. We're doing them a disservice now by telling them, hey, you got to wait, but we shouldn't have done that. We should have waited until we got the money. It's a really stupid thing we did.
All right, any more comments? We have a motion on the floor to bring back a resolution, and then if it passes, does there need to be a date? Will this go out the first paycheck in July or second?
We would have that as part of the resolution. I would need to check with Veronica and,
Does anybody
Lisa
want
and
to?
HR for timing
Okay.
on this.
Okay, well, any adjustments, we can make that one a resolution. All right, there's a motion on the floor to bring forth a resolution for this premium pay at our next meeting. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? We have, the motion passes by 5, 4, and 1 opposed. Okay, all right, we got a resolution for next meeting on proposed Van Wyck Fire District. Mr. Willis.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, just want to give you a heads up on this one because this will be coming to you on the June 28th meeting. It will be a resolution to create the Van Wyck Fire Protection District. Similar to what we have in place now with Pleasant Valley and Indian Land, one would be created. We would have the advisory referendum at the November general election, and then come back to y'all. The resolution basically starts the process. You also have the timeline in here. John, any comments from legal perspective on this?
No, other than, the referendum is not a required component of it, but county council's done it in the last 2 fire districts and probably politically would not want to force a district on people that didn't want it, but it's not legally required. But anyway, that's about it.
This will go before the voters.
For non-binding referendum.
Yeah, I would like to know, Mr. Chairman, we just went through the general budget, and I didn't see a line item or a fund for the Van Wyck Fire Department because the people in Treetops are already putting their fire fee into that account, but I don't know where that account is.
It's maintained separately.
Where was it? I didn't see it in any documentation I got.
Well, they'll.
They can provide it at the next meeting, but I didn't show up, so where is it?
Just in terms of budgeting, we haven't budgeted that yet because they honestly haven't collected enough in the past
So-
each year.
But they have collected some.
Yep.
Oh, yes, sir.
But no one's
Where is it?
requested use of it either yet. I mean, I
Yeah,
think,
that's restricted. I don't
yeah,
think.
it's
everybody's
not
gonna
being
get in
used for
trouble.
anything.
Yeah, but where is it and which line is it?
And I would encourage other fire departments to look at this funding mechanism too, because there are issues on the other end, talking to the chief down at Elgin. 30 years ago, you used to have 30 firemen. You had, and as he said, a lot of them were self-employed that worked construction, worked in the community, and were able to respond. And now, they're struggling with 6 to 8 to 10 firemen. And, they're getting 2 paid firemen on a Thursday. But, he mentioned the possibility of, hey, maybe a fire district, fee district down there where, he sees the possibility of collecting enough for the county to maybe fund firemen for the other 4 days of the week. So, I mean, that's something to me that made sense because the staffing is a real concern.
If any of them want to, I think.
And I think
the
council
Fire
would.
Commission may have some comment on that. I would note at this point,
I know, but
it's
it's
too late
something
to come
would
on.
look
It would be looking
at.
for the November 22 election.
Look at for down the road that I wouldn't oppose any department, later on personally, applying for this. I don't see making the fire department collect 15% signatures. Personally, I would support any department that wishes to pursue this option down the road.
And we do appreciate council doing this, so they didn't have to go collect signatures. We're just doing it by ordinance and let the voters vote.
Yeah.
Well, there's 800 houses in Treetops, and they're all paying it, so I'm sure it's gonna pass, because there's way more people.
So we
in
don't
that
need
area.
anything, you don't need a,
No, so this is information. We'll have the resolution for council to act on at the next meeting.
anything else on the table or pre-committed, anything that we need to know about?
Mr. Chairman, as y'all heard earlier, we're going to cancel the executive session, so we don't have that. I know there is some paperwork that Sherry needs to have signed this evening with John. One thing I would note, I just sent this out, is just food for thought. It's a memo about potential uses for some of the American Rescue Plan funds. We're certainly not to the point of saying, here's what we want to do, but we need to start, at least be thinking about some things. If anybody doesn't have them, we'll be happy to get you the NACO fact sheets and things like that. I would note that some of the things we were really hoping to use the money for, we're not going to be able to. Besides premium pay for the essential workers, the big thing they're looking at, water, sewer, broadband, and I guess, the lack of a better term, equity, food insecurity, housing insecurity for low, moderate income type neighborhoods. Think of it kind of like a CDBG
Well,
type situation.
the one good thing, there's 3 years, and there's a lot of money out there with a lot of counties that are not gonna be able to spend the money within the guidelines. That I think that you'll see some tinkering with the guidelines down the road, and
I hope so. We have until December 31st of '24 to appropriate the money, December 31st of '26 to actually complete projects and wrap everything up. So there certainly is no rush on this, but just wanted to kind of get it on your radar.
all right.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to do a big shout out to the 911 people. When the Chester thing was going on, when that murderer was on the run, at 3 a.m. one morning, my wife comes running downstairs saying, somebody's in our yard there, car's blocking the driveway. And first thing I did was I grabbed the phone, dialed 911, and the operators were so professional, and ended up being a deputy in the yard. And she said, please, sir, just calm down.
You need to tell us something else, the rest of the story.
Just go out there and talk to him. And I said, yes, ma'am, I sure will. But they were so professional and so helpful and so timely. I really appreciate what they do.
All right. Well, we appreciate all our county employees. And at 8:46 on the second reading of a budget, I think I'm looking for a.
Shout out to our crowd tonight, sticking with us.
Yeah.
Kind of good crowd last night. Appreciate all y'all.
I'm looking for a motion to adjourn, Mr. Honeycutt.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be more than happy to, because I told the wife I probably wouldn't be home till Tuesday. So,
I have a motion at 8:46.
with that having been said, I make a motion, we adjourn these proceedings immediately.
To adjourn for Mr. Honeycutt, and I'm looking for a second.
Second.
I got a second for Mr. Graham. All in favor, raise your right hand. Have unanimous approval.